Coronavirus is impacting all businesses, and I took the opportunity to interview the CEO of Friends of Westonbirt Arboretum, Mike Coe. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for talking, John.
No worries. I just really wanted to ask some questions around sort of how the current situation is affecting the charity sector as a whole, and in particular Friends of Westonbirt Arboretum.
Sure.
But first of all, let's put some context to it. So can you tell me a little bit about Westonbirt, the National Arboretum?
Yeah, so Westonbirt National Arboretum is roughly 630 acres. It's managed by Forestry England, but it's supported by our charity, the Friends of Westonbirt Arboretum. The site itself has to be self-funded, which has got many challenges, as you can imagine, in the current climate. I mean, there's over 15,000 species of trees, and the revenues that we come in to help look after this as a visitor attraction and look after the trees is multifaceted. And you can imagine that the closure, the enforced closure, has had a massive effect on all those revenue streams. And although obviously it's been necessary, and I completely understand for the safety of visitors and staff, it has been, it's had a significant effect. Tourism itself, it's worth millions to the southwest. So you can understand the knock-on effects of closing a big national visitor attraction like the National Arboretum to industries like hotels, shops, cafes. So the whole sector at the moment, it isn't moving, and that has all these knock-on effects, and something that we need to really consider.
Okay. Just recently with some of the government announcements, have you got a sort of date in mind, or are you still in the dark?
Yeah, and this is where, obviously the government advice for certain areas and a will to get people back into work. What they have done is they've said that ticketed attractions at the moment, ticketed attractions have to close. So we're currently trying to build up a case as the Friends to lobby the government say, hang on a minute, we've got a big outdoor space, 630 acres. We do this. We have managed this sort of events at our concerts, at our Enchanted Christmas, giving away time slots to ensure the flow of traffic. And we're able to operate and manage this at a much safer level than we think the most open parks that are now open. But at the moment, there's that line in there, the ticketed attractions, which means that legally we can't open. So we're working on that and lobbying really hard to get the Arboretum open for both our members and for the general public.
Okay, all right. So, you touched on revenue streams sort of when you first opened and talked about the National Arboretum. Can you sort of talk me through the revenue streams and how those have been affected?
Yeah, sure. So, as Friends of Westonbirt Arboretum on the charity, we're underpinned by our membership donations, and the current enforced enclosure means it poses some risks to that income. And although we've seen a great amount of loyalty from our members who are supported and continuing to renew through it, which supports our conservation, education and participation aims, we also understand that there's pressure on our membership themselves. Some of those have seen their lives, change under the current impacts of the corona lockdown as well. So we're obviously really thankful that membership has been fairly supportive. We also fundraise for the projects on site and the causes. And we're going to be competing for smaller pots of money in the sector. As charities up and down the country, their incomes become squeezed for resource. So they're all going to be out there trying to fundraise for the same amount of money. So that's going to start to get squeezed as well. And we can sort of recognise that can happen, especially for smaller charities as well, or those charities that aren't used to trying to fundraise in that way. We manage our event spaces. And so as you can imagine, bookings have completely dried up in our venues, and also for future bookings as well. So there's a great loss of revenue for those sort of events. And for the Arboretum, we've lost our summer concerts on the forestry side. So significant losses, both in terms of revenue, but also that associated engagement, getting people to really know the Arboretum. The site closure affects our retail space. As you can imagine, we've got a shop on site. So we've lost revenue through both shop and forestry through the catering side of it. Forestry have also lost a significant day revenue from the visitors coming through the gates, and also the education, the work outside of revenues, the education work, engagement work, public health work that we do. All of that, has had to come to a standstill. So the work that we do is really struggling at the moment.
Okay. So, looking at the charity sector as a whole, what can you say about some of the trends that you've noticed over the last few weeks?
Yeah, sort of a few weeks and now to months, really. I mean, there's certainly a worrying time for charities. I think the big thing for people to remember is many charities operate on relatively small cash reserves, as their funds that they generate are largely put towards their charitable aims. So really, cash is a significant problem for many, well, even larger charities, but small charities, as you can imagine. Now, there's government support to these charities, which is really welcome, and that's come through in a number of different ways. The lottery have given support, power to change, arts council. There's a number of ways that money has been distributed, but it's just not enough at the moment. And there are also many charities that won't fall into those categories that can access that cash that's been provided. So many of these are under imminent threat. And it would be a real danger to the communities that they serve if some of these charities weren't able to survive through this.
Okay.
Many charities rely on donations, and in the current climate, fund values are going to be hit. I mean, some of the wealthiest are going to have to see their funds start to shrink at the moment, and it's going to take a while for those funds to recover. And a lot of people, rely on those high net worth individuals for their support. Trusts and grant giving bodies will also have seen some losses through that as well, with the limitations on the support that they can give. In the medium term, or even to long term, I do see charities having to work together more and pool resource in a way, certainly within the Bristol area where you're based. Bristol's very good at charities working together at some sort of level. I think that could be done more, sharing of that resources. And there are organisations out there that can help to facilitate that working together.
Okay. Could I ask you, do you know any names of those organisations? Could you recommend anybody that a charity could potentially reach out to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's Bosca, which is helps and supports some of those charities. There's also the Quartet within Bristol itself. There's the Quartet Community Foundation, which has a number of charities that hold funds within Quartet. Bristol Charities are working together to support as well. But actually, I think it's for charities in specific sectors to get together. I know certainly from my attractions background, sort of charities within the attractions background, they already regularly meet and discuss ways of working closer together. So I think there is a number of things that can be done for charities to help and pool resource. But of course, there's so much more that's needed to be done out there. I mean, it can only be done on a local level. Yeah, there's charities up and down the country that are struggling.
Okay. But there are sort of support.
Sorry, mate, I just got a bit of a cough.
All right. There are charity networks out there, or support groups for charities that people can get involved in if they needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll probably find that a lot of charities are already involved in some of those groups. It's about working and collaborating together.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. So, it seems like a silly question, but I think it's one that's worth definitely asking. What have been the most significant challenges that you found during this time?
Yeah, and there have been a number of charities, but to pick a couple, I guess, that are the most significant. I mean, I sort of mentioned it before, but cash is king. And certainly from a charity perspective, cash flow is a significant worry, as I talked about with these limited funds that they hold, or certainly hold in cash. One of my old mentors, Malachi McReynolds, always used to remind me that profitable businesses can go bust, and it's not just about income coming in; it's about managing the cash flow. Within our retail and events enterprises, the tap was effectively switched off, which means there's no way of generating income. We're quite lucky as a charity that our members have continued to support our objectives on site, which has helped us through this period of closure. But yeah, that cash is important. The government has helped. So as we've all heard now, furlough has really started to help and support cash within charities and visitor attractions. And it's really welcome. Of course, there is a point where that will start to be wound down, and that will really start to see. We'll really start to see the effects of cash flows once that furlough starts to reduce. It's vital that businesses in all sectors who would otherwise be profitable have continued access to cash. I think more should be done to release. There's been some grants and loans from the government available, but this money needs to be easier to get hold of. And I know that sort of Rishi was looking at other ways for the government to underpin this cash by 100%. And I think that's really helped start to release it, but more needs to be done. Otherwise, we're going to see very shortly, some I've heard of not just charities, organisations with, only weeks of cash remaining, which is a really worrying place to be.
Yeah, sure.
The other big one for me is uncertainty, and we've lived through a lot of that, haven't we? As with Brexit, uncertainty is a key challenge for charities and visitor attractions, just like it is for all organisations. We're in unknown territory, and it's difficult to plan a strategy when there are so many variables, so many possibilities. What level of cash we need? What's our re-entry strategy? How are we going to move staff back into? What level of investment will be needed in things like marketing? When we reopen, we have to draw more members back in. What are we going to do to draw those in? How will we reopen? All of these questions mean resource planning is really, really difficult and really, really challenging. And again, it's not just for charities and attractions. It's across the piece. There's people wondering, what do I do now? And obviously, there's so many different industries that guidance can only be fairly vague.
Okay, so moving on to that then, and I don't want to be pessimistic, but there doesn't seem to be a much light at the end of the tunnel. But let's assume that we are going to get out of this at some point. What sort of challenges will you see there up at the Arboretum when the lockdown is lifted?
Yeah, I say lockdown is starting to slowly be lifted. People are travelling further. People are being encouraged to go back to work. Obviously, there's a number of challenges for that. But at the end of lockdown, there will be a high level of uncertainty as to what it will look like. So normality is a long way off. So we need to be starting to think about what is the new normal. And that's the position sort of we're taking as both a charity and at Westonbirt Arboretum. How do we effectively open with a new normal? For instance, how do we bring staff back into the Arboretum while maintaining a safe level of distancing first? And that's going to involve a number of risk assessments, risk assessing, all these things. And that's going to take some time. We are doing that, and we're slowly looking at each area of the attraction, and as the charity and as the Forestry England, and how we can go and do that. So that's a huge, operational challenge. And then once we've got the staff back, how do we safely introduce visitors into a visitor attraction? And the eyes will be on us as a major national attraction. There'll be other attractions looking at how we go about doing that. And this will take some careful planning between us and our industry colleagues, looking at time slots, looking at how we can manage customer flows, all of those sorts of things where we sort of took for normal. We're now having to think our way around it. So like I said, it's a new normal for us. And cash flows, they won't return instantly across all areas of the business. So we need to understand where we can best use our cash, how we can make sure that we've got enough to keep us going in the right places as well. So there will be, spending restrictions, those sorts of things, while that uncertainty is there, and it's not going to go away for some time.
Okay. And so far, how have your sort of staff been affected? Sorry, a multiple question here. And sort of how many staff do you have? How have they been affected? And have you still got staff on site?
Yeah, the Arboretum itself employs over 70 staff. We are Friends of Westonbirt Arboretums. We've got around 20 of those. So there's a number of people on site, volunteers, and this is the big one that people forget. The Arboretum has over 250 volunteers that help in different areas. Obviously, some of those are, beyond retirement age, and they are, in some of those risk categories. So it's all of those different questions: is how do we get people back safely and to do that? And so, how have they been affected? Well, our staff have been excellent, I have to say, in moving in the way that they've operated. Obviously, working office space for a lot of them. To working remotely from home. So we have got a number of people working remotely around the database, around our CRM, around our membership schemes as a charity. This has tested our infrastructure, of course, but on the whole, moving to the cloud, team members have really, really adapted well to the situation. And as an employer, we've had to be more flexible to work around, people, staff, employees with children, and restrictions of remote access. And actually, we've made use of the furlough scheme at the charity and at Forestry England, with staff that we've had to furlough, we've of course engaged those and given them an understanding of the situation to make them still feel like they know what's going on. Because the worst thing I can imagine for those staff is that isolation that they might feel. So mental health is a key area that we need to keep an eye on, both with staff that are working from home, but also those that have been furloughed. How do we do that? Things like video conferencing, coffee mornings, so that people can join in on a Microsoft Teams coffee morning. We've tried to create some level of an office environment to try and keep both spirits and mental health up. But it is a challenge, and it's a challenge for everyone. I don't think there's anyone that would say they haven't been affected in some way by the way that the corona lockdown has happened. I suppose one good thing to come out of this is that we've highlighted now across the organisation in certain areas that we can operate remotely, and it might be that we introduce more flexible working, certainly within the charity, moving forwards towards the end of this as well. So that's, as a charity, something that we can take out of it. Of course, the other challenge will be that returning to work and managing distance, staff anxiety is something that we need to do as a continual basis. Say that we've got risk assessments and a safe way to follow the government advice, but also that that staff feel comfortable within that, and that anxiety is managed. It's going to be a really difficult challenge for us, but also charities and organisations out there in the wider world.
Yeah, for sure. So what final message would you like to leave in response to the current crisis, both on a visitor attraction and a charity perspective? Sure.
So I guess in terms of visitor attractions, look, the Southwest, where we are, has a wealth of attractions in this area. And it's obviously led by the National Arboretum, but of course got loads of incredible places like over in Bath, the Roman Baths, Bristol, where you're based. There are a number in Bristol, like We the Curious, Bristol Zoo, the SS Great Britain, Arnos Vale, where I used to work and run, and all of these spaces provide incredible mental and physical well-being benefits that are currently being lost for people, that whether they're at home or not being able to utilize these wonderful resources. And it's vital that once ticketed attractions start to open, and we'll be lobbying for that to happen in a safer way as possible as the National Arboretum or the Friends of Westonbirt, that people return to these spaces. And I have no doubt that they will. And I believe that the recovery will be rapid as people seek a quality visitor experience when they're finally allowed out and able to do so. But please, what I will say to the public is be patient with these spaces. Distance measuring and measurements will be in place for a long, long time yet. And these measures will, help us to meet the government requirements, but they will also slow down the entry into places. There won't be as many people allowed onto sites for quite some time. For charities, on the charity sector, it's vital that individuals, where they can, continue their support. These organisations carry out often essential services. They inspire objectives, and they need support now more than ever to reach these outcomes. I mean, communities will suffer without the investment that these charities help and support. We are in unprecedented times, and I know, as a country, we've seen some terrible, terrible losses. But at the same time, there's been all the inspiring work, from key workers, but also across the sectors. And we need to maintain that hope as we look to recover. Certainly, as a charity and visitor attraction section, we will do that. I don't want to leave this too negative. We will rebound. We just got to make sure that we weather that storm and work together to enable us to do that.
And Mike, I have to ask, the photo behind you, that's a recent photo of the Arboretum?
Yeah, and the Arboretum is looking absolutely stunning at the moment. So this is why we need to get our members and visitors back to look at it, because it's a shame that the start of the year was so wet. We had it really wet, so people weren't coming, and then of course just as the weather started to change, obviously the lockdown was introduced. So we've got these wonderful spaces. We need to get them open in a safe way for people to come and really experience these sites of our national attractions.
Of course. Well, look, Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me today.
Thank you for
I'm looking forward to getting up to that Arboretum as soon as